Today, Nigel chats to Cheryl Baker in part 1 of his interview. Bucks Fizz, how did it all start? This year's Eurovision and lots more on the Showbiz podcast.
Today, we're very lucky to have actually talking on the podcast today at Showbiz podcast. It's the one and only Cheryl Baker. Hello, Cheryl.
Hello. Do you know what? I am not the one and only. No, because I'll tell you how I know. I got paid. It was about 1,500 quid. This was a few years ago. And I thought, what's this for? Notification came through from Equity.
Yeah.
And it said, for my part, for my roles in a couple of films, big films. I can't remember what they were now, but blockbuster films.
That's all right.
1,500 quid. So I was obviously a bit part, you know. And I thought, this is weird. And then I had a follow-up letter saying, we're terribly sorry, we've sent it to the wrong Cheryl Baker. So there is another one, which is in America.
Well, keep getting the checks in. That's the main thing. Don't worry about anything else. So we'll cast our minds all the way back, Cheryl, if you don't mind. We go back before you became famous as Bucks Fizz. You were like in the stockbroker's office. Is that right?
Oh, I worked in different places. Yeah, I was for 5 years from leaving school. I worked in stockbrokers, ship brokers, commodity brokers, even the City of London. And I used to like temping because I used to get bored very easily with jobs. So I used to go to temp agencies and get a temp job. But I was very good.
Yeah.
I was very good. And every job that I went for, they went, would you stay on as a permanent? But I never did. I only ever stayed 6 months with me max. I used to get bored. I wanted to be a singer. When I left work to become a professional singer, I also left the Amateur Operatic Society. And I loved it. We did some great shows. We did the serious stuff. We did like The Merry Widow and Deflated Mouse and the Gypsy Baron. And I loved all those because you had to dress, you know, in the garb of the time, and it was lots of crinolines and things. I loved it. But we also did things like The Boyfriend and I can't think now, but you know, the Carousel, the more light-hearted stuff as well.
Did that all put you in good tune and ready for the music business and going on TV? I suppose it would do. It's a good setup, that, wasn't it, really?
It made me want to be on stage. Yeah. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I did love, I mean, it's great. When you love singing, it's so good to join a company where you can literally sing your heart out, you know, sing as loud as you possibly can, and lots of other voices around it, like being in a choir, you know. Yeah. I think the idea of the rock choir is a great one, because you get to sing all your favourite songs and in harmony and full voice, you know, full volume. Go for it. Yeah.
Excellent. So how did it all come about then, Bucks Fizz? How did that come about in the first place?
Well, I'd been in another band, Coco, and we did Eurovision. So I had experience, and I'd been in Coco for 5 years, and I'd had enough. And we did a lot of recording, and we used a recording company called Mayfair Sound. And someone else who used Mayfair Sound was a lady called Nicola Martin. And Mayfair, whenever they put on an event party or something like that, they would always invite Coco, the band I was in, and they would also always invite Nicola. So I got to know Nicola through these little soirees, you know, with Mayfair Sound. And then she came, when I finished with Coco, I said to Mayfair, would you take me on? I can do all your letters and your invoices. I can answer your phones, and I can be there to do backing vocals if anyone needs it. And so I went to work for them. And one day in came Nicola Martin to use the studio. And she said, Cheryl, why are you here? And I said, I've left Coco. So a couple of months later I had a phone call. I'm putting this group together. Do you want to be in it? And that was, you know, it was, what do they call it? It's Kismet, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I left Coco at exactly the right time because, you know, Bucks Fizz was being formed.
Wow,
so
that's great, isn't it?
Yeah, really.
Great story, that. How did you think the Eurovision went this year? Did you enjoy it?
It was amazing. And we were there. We were in the auditorium last year. Actually, 2 or 3 times we were in the auditorium. And it was, last year was fantastic. The BBC did a great job.
Yeah.
As did, you know, the Ukrainian companies. But no, I liked this year. I love Eurovision. I loved it when it used to be, you know, donkeys years ago when I first started watching it as a child. Yeah. I've always loved it.
Yeah.
But I Mike Nolan hit it on the head for me. He said it's gone a bit smutty, and I think he's right. And unfortunately, I think Ollie was the biggest culprit, or one of the biggest. Actually, not the biggest culprit. The biggest culprit was the bloke who didn't have any knickers on. No.
Yeah.
But you know, you don't need, in my opinion, to simulate sex.
Yeah.
In a Eurovision Song Contest, you don't need it. It's not necessary.
No.
You know, the competition is fantastic. It's the biggest show on the planet, isn't it? There's nothing bigger, no bigger audience. It's fantastic. You don't need the smut.
No, you don't.
You don't need to cheapen it. I think it's a great honour to be a part of Eurovision, and they do a great job. The production, the special effects, it's phenomenal. You don't need smut.
No, the light shows is incredible, isn't it? All the light effects they have now.
Honestly,
since you were on, when you were on in the 80s, you know, it was completely changed, hasn't it? The sets have, anyway.
We only just had colour TV then. I mean, what we had then was, you know, lights on, lights off, and you know, a couple of pillars. It was, I mean, it's nothing compared to what it is now.
Yeah.
So much better now. I honestly think it's fantastic. I just think that some of I think they're trying the shock element, you know, to get votes, and I think, as far as Ollie Alexander's concerned, I think it backfired on him.
Lucky enough to be on it twice, weren't you? And the second
I did it
time around was a success, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, 1978, we won the Song for Europe with a song called The Bad Old Days, and we went to Paris for the Eurovision. And actually, I didn't think about it at the time, but yeah, there's not many people that have done Eurovision more than once, so I feel quite proud of myself there. But yeah, we came 11th, which at that time was the worst the UK had ever done. But now, you know, we'd go, whoa, we did really well this year, didn't we? We came 11th. But I've got to say, it's a lot better to win it than to come 11th. I must say that.
Yeah. So how did that set you up then for going on to the TV eventually? Was that like, you know, your music? Obviously, you were used to performing on Top of the Pops and things like that, weren't you? And all these shows that you were on. Yeah. So obviously, you got a taste of TV when you were doing that, and you ended up on the TV. You did so many shows on the TV.
Well, it came about because I liked talking. I like talking. Yeah. And whenever we were interviewed, I did used to wait for someone else to speak. And if they didn't, then I've always got an answer. And so I used to be almost like the spokesperson for the group. And I would say next to me, there was Mike Nolan. So me and Mike, we were the gobby ones. Jay was very shy. Bobby was very boring. And so... so it used to be me and Mike. And it was in 1984, so we'd been together for 3 years.
Yeah.
And I said to our manager, Jill, I'd really like to do some TV presenting. And so she wrote to television companies. And at the same time, she had a letter from Tyne Tees asking if I'd be interested in co-presenting a children's program called How Dare You? Yeah. And that's what I did. That's what started the whole ball rolling. I did that. That led on to this thing, that led on to that thing, Record Breakers, The Funny Side, all the different TV shows that I did were all triggered really from that first show.
Did you fall straight into it? Did you find it pretty easy when you started?
It's not easy. It's quite nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
And in those days, you know, now you watch telly, they've got their script. They've got the script in their hands. They've got the script on the table. In those days, that was taboo, and there was no auto cue. So what I used to do was the night before, I'd be in my hotel room, because inevitably a lot of the stuff I did was done in Manchester or Liverpool. The night before, I'd be learning my lines. I'd be learning that, you know, reading up about the person I'm interviewing, and you know, it was so it wasn't easy.
Oh,
it wasn't easy. It's a lot easier to go on stage and sing than it is to be a television presenter, I've got to tell you.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy it.
Record Breakers sticks out in my mind. What was the best record breaker you had? Can you remember that one that stuck out in your mind and thought, wow, that is some record they broke there?
Yeah, well, see, probably the boring ones. I found the Russian cosmonauts who'd stayed in space for longer than anyone else. I found that fascinating. But I suppose you know, there were some extraordinary records.
Yeah.
The fun ones were a bit of a laugh, and especially in the studio, because we'd stand at the back. Roy Castle and I would stand at the back going, "Come on, you can do it, yeah." And Roy would go to me, "They're never going to do it, you know." So he'd put it on the side. So it was great. But I suppose really the ones that I remember more are the ones that we did, you know. So we did the longest rope slide, which was from the top of Blackpool Tower, and it was a world record.
Wow.
We did the biggest jazz band, and we did the longest river dance line, and I had to learn river dance.
Oh,
and
right.
Honest,
but that was hard.
I couldn't believe how hard it was.
Yeah.
Oh, but anyway, we broke those records, so super proud of that.
It was a great show. It really was a great show. Always remember that. You got into a bit of radio as well of recent. Are you on a radio station at the moment?
No, it's finished because the promoters or the backers pulled out, which was a great shame. I loved it. I did it for about 18 months, 2 years. It was called Great British Radio. Yeah. Nothing to do with GB News, nothing to do with that. It was there was no news on it. The only news they had was good news, and I thought that was what a clever idea that was. Yeah. But yeah, I started with my own 80s show on a Saturday evening, right, for 2 hours, and it got the biggest listeners of the whole station. And so they gave me a daily show, and it started with 2 hours, and then they made it 3 hours. So it was a lot, actually. I was losing a lot of sleep because I had scripted it all myself.
That's right.
And it took a long time. It took a lot of time. And then it was just before Christmas, maybe the day before Christmas Eve or something, and I was scripting my show that I was doing the next day. Yeah. And the lovely Mike Osman, who asked me to be a part of it, great impersonator, very funny comic, and he used to do the breakfast show, and he rang me and he said, "I've got bad news." And I said, "What?" And he said, "The backers have pulled out. We've got to go off air." And I went, "Oh." I said, "I'm just scripting tomorrow's show." And he said, "Well, don't bother because we go off air at midnight tonight." Oh. And that was such a shame. But you know, I'm hopeful that, you know, if I get offered a show on another radio station, I'd love to do one show a week. That would do me. Yeah. Give me an 80s show. Give me an 80s show. I'd love to. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, it's great fun, especially the 80s. It's iconic, isn't it, really? The 80s is fantastic. Super. It's
funny. Now it is, but back in the 90s, because I was still with Bucks Fizz until the end of 93, and the 80s then was like, so old fashioned, you know. And and the gigs we were doing were awful, and you couldn't. There was no such thing in those days as an 80s retro night, because it was like, 80s. Thank goodness we're out of that decade. Now, you know, it's massive again. So, which is great for us because it means we're still working.
And you do a bit of writing as well, don't you, Cheryl? Is that right? A fitness book, I believe, a low-calorie cookbook.
Oh, I've got my low-calorie cookbook, yeah. I do love cooking, I've got to say. I love cooking. So I might do another one. I've done a few sort of video things that have gone on YouTube as well with cooking. Yeah. But the thing that I must finish is my blimmin' autobiography. I've been writing it for years. The trouble is, things keep happening. Life keeps moving on, you know. Yeah. It's got to stop for a while so I can catch up and finish my book. I think it's easier to look back to the early days. I can remember loads of stuff from the early days. Yeah. It's more the recent stuff that I think, I haven't even mentioned that, and now that's happened. Do I mention that as well? And actually, it's funny as well because when you do look back, there are things you remember and things you don't remember. Yeah. And Mike Nolan, you know, he's one of my best mates, and we discussed this, and he says, "Do you remember when we did so and so?" And I go, "No." He goes, "You don't remember it? It was massive." And then I'll say to him, "Oh, how about when we did so and so?" And he'll go, "I don't remember that." So you have different memories of different things. Some things you remember, some things you don't.
There's more from Cheryl Baker in part 2 of the interview to follow. Thanks for watching, and please like and share the Showbiz podcast.